My daughter-in-law had an accident and fell into a coma. On one of my visits to the hospital, my grandson came up to me and whispered, "Grandma, Mom isn't sick, she's faking." Confused, I replied, "What? Don't say that." Then he handed me his phone, and I froze. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has reached. I pulled the old motorcycle out from the front of the bakery, my hands still smelling of flour and yeast. This morning was busier than usual. Customers were coming and going nonstop. Every day that passed, I felt a small joy, seeing the warm loaves of bread arranged on the shelves, hearing the laughter and conversations of people. But what I wanted most at that moment was to get to the school to pick up Leo, my dear grandson. The boy was always excited, telling me what happened in class, his eyes shining as if he wanted to show me the whole world. Just thinking about his smile made all my tiredness disappear. I had just put on my helmet ready to start the engine when the phone in my pocket buzzed loudly. An unknown number. I frowned. I hesitated for a second but ended up putting it to my ear. The voice on the other side was rushed cold like a knife interrupting my thoughts. "Are you Mrs. Davis? Your daughter-in-law just had a serious car accident. We're rushing her to St. Gabriel's private hospital." I felt a ringing in my ears, as if the whole world had suddenly gone silent. The motorcycle wobbled under my hands, almost falling to the ground. I stood motionless, clinging to the handlebars, feeling like the blood had stopped flowing in my body. My heart was beating so hard it drowned out all the noises around me. Emily, my daughter-in-law, whom I always loved like a daughter in a serious accident. Those words echoed in my head over and over, but I couldn't grasp their true weight. I only knew that in that instant, I had to go see her, find out what was happening. I quickly dialed Michael's number, my son, but I only heard the unanswered ringtones. He must already be at the hospital, I told myself, trying to stay calm. But inside me, fear burned like a fire, consuming any attempt to think clearly. I wanted to rush to the hospital, but then I remembered Leo. The boy was still at school, waiting for me to pick him up. I couldn't leave him alone. I couldn't let him find out from others. I had to be strong for Leo, for Michael, for the whole family. With a burning heart, I sped towards the school. The city street seemed more crowded than ever. Every car, every horn was a wall holding me back. Every second that passed felt like a stab. I wondered, how is Emily? Is she in pain? Is she conscious? Images of a brutal accident flashed through my mind, and I had to force them away. I could only pray, murmuring the prayers my mother had taught me as a child, begging for a miracle. When I got to the school gate, I saw Leo waiting, hugging his superhero backpack. His little face lit up when he saw me. His eyes sparkled as if he was about to tell me something funny, but I couldn't wait. I couldn't let him finish. With a hoarse and trembling voice, I said, "Leo, get on the motorcycle now. Your mom had an accident. We have to go to the hospital." I saw his smile disappear in a flash, like a light switched off in an instant. He didn't ask anything, just got on in silence, his small hands clinging tightly to my waist. He didn't say a word the whole way, but I could feel his fear in the pressure of that hug. I wanted to turn around, hug him, tell him everything would be okay, but I didn't even dare to believe it myself. St. Gabriel's Hospital appeared before my eyes, cold and suffocating. The white building, the strong smell of disinfectant that filled my nose made me feel short of breath. I led Leo by the hand through the long hallways, my steps hurried but heavy. When we reached the emergency room, I saw Michael standing there, stunned like a ghost. His hair was messy. His once pristine white shirt was now wrinkled, the sleeves stained with dark blood. I knew it was Emily's blood from when he carried his wife here. Seeing my son like that tore my soul apart. Michael, my strong son, now looked like a lost child. When he saw me, Michael ran to me, buried his head in my shoulder, sobbing like never before. "Mom, Emily. The doctor said the situation is very serious." His voice broke, trembling, as if all his strength had vanished. I hugged him, trying to stay strong, but I was shaking too. Leo, seeing his father cry, also burst into tears. His childish, disoriented voice screamed, "Mom, The boy clung tightly to Michael's pants, his big eyes full of fear as if afraid of being abandoned in the middle of this storm. I knelt down, pulled him to my chest, trying to protect him. But how could I protect him when I was drowning in fear myself? The three of us sat on the cold plastic chairs in the hallway. Time seemed to stand still. The strong smell of disinfectant, the dry voice of the speakers sounding over and over. Every noise was like a knife piercing my heart. I looked at Michael, at Leo, and then at the closed door of the emergency room. I wanted to scream, to pound on the door, to do anything to know how Emily was, but I could only stay there, helpless, waiting. Almost 3 hours passed, as long as a century. Finally, the emergency room door opened. An older man with a serious face came out. He introduced himself as Dr. Peterson, the hospital director. His voice was deep and slow, as if he weighed every word. The patient suffered a traumatic brain injury and has fallen into a deep coma. We did everything we could, but when she wakes up depends on the patient's will. Those words were a blow to my chest. Deep coma patient's will. Those phrases echoed in my mind, but I couldn't comprehend them. Emily, the woman who was always radiant, full of life, now lay motionless between life and death. Michael collapsed. If I hadn't held him, he would have fallen to the floor. His eyes clouded over, as if his entire world had crumbled. Leo, scared, curled up in my arms, his small body trembling. I held him tight, trying to hide my pain, but my tears were already streaming down, silent, impossible to contain. I didn't want Leo to see his grandmother cry, but how could I be strong when my family was breaking apart? A young nurse with a name tag that read, Martha, approached with a clipboard. In a soft voice, she said, "The family can see the patient through the glass, but please don't make any noise." I nodded. I took Leo and Michael to the thick glass window. Through it, I saw Emily lying motionless among a tangle of wires. Her face was pale, lifeless. Her lips, which always smiled, were now closed, as if she had gone far away to a place we couldn't reach her. Michael pressed his forehead against the glass and cried out in despair, "Love, open your eyes and look at me." His heartbreaking voice echoed, breaking the quiet of the hallway. The nurses rushed to calm him gently, but I knew nothing could ease my son's pain at that moment. I stood there holding Leo, feeling every weak beat of his small heart. I wanted to say something to comfort him, but my throat closed up, unable to utter a single word. That night, I practically had to drag Leo back home. The boy was crying his eyes out. He wanted to stay with his mother, but I couldn't leave him in the suffocating atmosphere of the hospital. I comforted him. I promised him we would come back the next day, though I myself didn't know what awaited us. Michael insisted on staying curled up in a plastic chair in the hallway, his lost gaze fixed on the room's door. I looked at my son, and my heart broke, but I knew I couldn't stay. Leo needed me, the bakery needed me, and this whole family depended on me to stay standing. In the days after that fateful moment, my small house seemed to be covered in a dark, heavy fog. Every morning when I woke up, it felt like a rock was sitting on my chest, making every breath difficult. I have lived for 62 years. I have witnessed partings and deaths, but I had never felt as helpless as I did now. Emily was still there in the hospital, motionless like a statue, and Michael, the son I was so proud of for his strength, was now just a shadow making St. Gabriel's Hospital his second home. Every day I saw Michael sitting in front of Emily's room, still as a stone figure. His eyes were red without their former sparkle. During the day he would stay there staring at the emergency room door, as if by watching long enough Emily would open her eyes, walk out, and smile at him like before. But at night, when darkness fell, Michael sought solace in alcohol. More than once, I found him sitting alone on a hospital bench, a bottle in his hand, his gaze lost like a tormented soul. One time I arrived earlier than usual and found him lying in the hallway next to an empty tequila bottle rolling on the floor. A young nurse, maybe Martha, approached cautiously and told me in a low voice, "Ma'am, he shouldn't be drinking so much, it's not good for him." I could only nod, suppressing a sigh. Though inside I felt like something was suffocating me. I did everything I could to pull Michael out of that abyss. Every morning I got up at 3, turned on the small stove, and prepared the freshly baked bread he loved so much. I wrapped it carefully and took it to the hospital, hoping that familiar aroma would awaken something in him. But it was always the same. He would barely take a couple of bites, and then leave everything his gaze fixed on the room's door. "Mom, I'm not hungry," he would mutter in a hoarse voice, as if he had no emotion left. I would look at him and feel like I was breaking inside. I wanted to scream at him, to shake him, to tell him that he had to live, to be strong for Leo, for himself. But I could only collect the dishes in silence, taking them back with a heavy heart. The burden of the entire family now rested on my aging shoulders. I was no longer young. Every morning when I got up, I felt every aching joint, every tired muscle. But I couldn't stop. The small bakery was our only source of income, and I had to keep it running. At 3 a.m, when the whole city was asleep, I was already kneading dough and lighting the oven. The smell of warm bread used to bring me joy, but now it only reminded me of the peaceful days we had lost. During the day, I tended the shop while checking the clock, then rushed to pick up Leo. There were days when the customers were so many I could barely breathe, but I still had to grit my teeth and smile at everyone, even though inside I just wanted to collapse. Leo, my little grandson, also changed completely. He used to be the sunshine of the house, with his radiant smile and endless stories. But now he has become quiet, withdrawn. Every afternoon coming out of school, I see him sitting silently in a corner of the playground, hugging his superhero backpack tightly, his gaze lost. Once his teacher took me aside, her voice full of concern. "Mrs. Davis, Leo has been very down lately. He doesn't play with the others, he just sits alone. Is there a problem at home?" I could only force a smile and give a vague answer. "He's just a little tired, don't worry." But inside I knew well that Leo was carrying a wound too big for his little heart. I wanted to hug him to tell him everything would be all right, but how could I promise something I didn't believe myself? Every afternoon, I took Leo to the hospital to visit his mother. It was part of the routine, part of that fragile hope that Emily would wake up. But the scene at the hospital never changed. Michael was still there with an unkempt beard smelling strongly of alcohol. I tried to keep Leo from noticing, but the boy was more sensitive than I thought. He would quietly take the drawings he made in class, press them against the cold glass, and whisper to his mother, "Mom, today I drew the whole family at the beach. It's you, Dad, Grandma, and me. Wake up soon so we can go for real." His voice trembled as if he were trying to hold on to a dream that was falling apart in his hands. I stood beside him, listening to every word, my heart in pieces. Emily remained there motionless, showing no signs of response. Michael used to take his son in his arms, and with a broken voice he would say, "Your mom hears you, son. She'll get better soon." But he was the one who ended up crying, and Leo, seeing him, would also break down in tears. I had to rush to comfort him and get him out of the room, even though I was falling apart inside too. My family's private life, once a source of pride, had now become gossip among the neighbors. One day, while standing in line at the supermarket, Mrs. Rose, an acquaintance of many years, pulled me aside and asked with a curious tone, "I don't see Michael and his wife together anymore. What happened? And Emily, is she okay?" I hesitated for a moment, trying to keep my voice calm. "Emily, she had an accident. She's in the hospital." But Mrs. Rose's prying eyes and the whispers of those nearby made me want to disappear. I clutched my basket and almost ran out, but the comments followed me like needles pricking my pride. I didn't want my family to be the talk of the town, but I knew that in a small neighborhood like this, nothing could be hidden forever. That night, Michael came home stumbling, reeking of alcohol. He looked at me with red eyes and shouted, "Don't tell anyone about Emily. I don't need their pity." His voice was harsh, but I knew that behind that anger was a pain impossible to put into words. I just nodded silently, holding back a sigh, and let him stumble up to his room. Leo was on the stairs, his childish gaze following his father's unsteady silhouette. He said nothing. He just went to his room with his head down, hugging his superhero pillow tightly. Seeing him, I wanted to run and hug him, but I knew nothing could ease his pain at that moment. That night, I was left alone in the cold kitchen, facing a mountain of bills that kept growing. Emily's hospital expenses, Leo's school, the bakery's maintenance. Every number was like a cut to my soul. I had worked my whole life with sweat to build a stable life for my family, and now everything seemed to be falling apart. That afternoon, the sun in the city was still relentless. I had just cleaned the bakery. I locked the door, got Leo in the car, and prepared for our daily visit to the hospital. The boy was in the back seat, quiet, clutching his superhero backpack as if it were the last comfort he had left. I wanted to say something to break the silence, but my throat was tight. I could only sigh and press the accelerator. When we arrived at St. Gabriel's Hospital, the familiar painful scene appeared before my eyes. The hallway was still cold. The smell of disinfectant burned my nose, and the announcements from the speakers sounded dry, one after another. Michael was sitting on the plastic chairs, his head down, dozing from sheer exhaustion. At his feet, an empty beer can rolled, shining under the fluorescent light. Seeing my son like this made my heart sink. Michael was once a man full of life, always laughing and talking loudly, but now he was just a shadow consumed by grief and alcohol. I motioned for Leo to be quiet. I didn't want to wake his father. The boy nodded, his round eyes full of worry, and followed me slowly. We both approached the thick glass of the room. Emily was there still, as if lost in a deep sleep. The steady beeping of the machine sounded like a cruel reminder that she was still alive, but hanging by a thread. Her face was pale with no trace of life, her lips closed as if guarding a secret. I looked at her with a shattered heart. How many times had I stood in this very spot, hoping for a miracle, waiting for her to open her eyes, smile and say, it was all just a nightmare, but it was always the same. The silence, and each time my heart broke a little more. I was about to take Leo's hand and lead him away to escape that suffocating atmosphere when he suddenly tugged at my clothes, stood on his tiptoes, leaned close to my ear and whispered quietly, but with a force that pierced my soul. "Grandma, I don't think Mom is sick. She's faking." I felt a sharp blow as if someone had slapped me. I turned, I looked directly into Leo's clear eyes and tried to speak calmly, though everything inside me was trembling. "Leo, don't talk nonsense. Your mom is very sick. You know that." But the boy didn't argue like he usually did. He lowered his head, his hands shaking as he turned on the old cell phone Michael had given him to watch cartoons. "Look at this, Grandma," he said in a voice so low I had to strain to hear him. The screen flickered on and showed the image of Emily's room. No one else was in the video, just her lying in bed surrounded by wires and tubes. But then, the unthinkable happened. Emily slowly opened her eyes, looked around as if checking to see if anyone was there, and then casually scratched her cheek. A moment later, she even sat up a little, took the glass of water from the table, took a sip, and lay back down, closing her eyes to become motionless again, as if nothing had happened. I stared at the screen, my head spinning, as if the whole world had turned upside down. That wasn't a woman in a coma. That was a fake. I sank into the chair, my hands weak, almost dropping the phone. Leo was beside me, his voice trembling as if he was scared by what he himself had discovered. "I've seen it a few times, Grandma." Whenever no one is here, Mom opens her eyes and looks around. But when you or Dad are here, she stays still. I don't know what she's doing, so I secretly recorded it for you to see. Hearing him, a chill ran down my spine. Leo's innocent whisper, that short video, were like a lightning bolt that shattered the fog inside me. Emily, my daughter-in-law, whom I had always loved like a daughter, was faking. But why? For what purpose? I quickly put the phone in my purse, trying to keep my voice as stern as possible. "Leo, you absolutely cannot tell your dad about this. Do you understand?" The boy nodded, his eyes shining with fear and confusion. I knew he didn't fully understand what was happening, but he felt the seriousness of it. I hugged him, trying to hide the storm raging inside me. But just then Michael stirred and woke up. He rubbed his eyes, looking at us with a hoarse voice. "What are you two talking about?" I flinched, shook my head, and changed the subject. Nothing, just reminding Leo to do his homework at home. Michael nodded, then pulled his son closer and whispered, "Don't worry, Mom will wake up soon." Leo lowered his head, avoiding his father's gaze. Seeing him like that, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. He was too young to carry this weight, to keep a secret from his own father. On the way home, I drove the motorcycle as if I were floating my feet, not feeling the ground. My mind was a mess. The images from the video replayed over and over like a non-stop horror movie. Leo's whisper, his terrified look, and Emily's motionless face, they were all pieces that didn't fit. I wondered, am I misinterpreting? Is it just an involuntary moment, a body reaction? But deep down, I knew that what I saw was no accident. Emily was hiding something, and it filled me with fear. Not fear for her, but for Michael, for Leo, for my entire family. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual, when the first light of day had not yet filtered through the crack in the door. I arrived at St. Gabriel's Hospital earlier than usual. When the hallways were still empty and only a few on-duty employees passed by in silence, Michael had not yet arrived. Maybe he had gone home to clean up after a whole night with his wife. I stood at the corner of the hallway looking through the window into Emily's room. She was still there, motionless, her face pale as wax. But now, every time I looked at her, I no longer saw the fragility of someone fighting between life and death. Instead, I only saw a veil of mystery, hiding something I couldn't yet figure out. Martha, the young nurse, exclusively assigned to Emily's care, was in the room. She was cleaning my daughter-in-law's body with gentle but somewhat mechanical movements. I hid around the corner of the hallway, watching her every move. Martha worked, but her eyes constantly darted outside as if afraid of being discovered. From time to time, she murmured something so low I couldn't understand, but enough to make me feel uneasy. Something was not right, I knew it for sure. My heart was a tangle of anger and fear, but I told myself I had to stay calm. If I wanted to find out the truth, I couldn't let my emotions take over. When Martha left the room carrying the chart, I took a deep breath and stepped forward. She was bent over writing, not noticing my presence. I tried to keep my voice calm, though my heart was pounding in my chest. "Good morning, Martha. Tell me, in the moments you care for Emily, have you ever noticed anything unusual? For example, does she ever wake up in secret when no one is around?" I pronounced each word carefully, watching her reaction closely. Martha jumped, as if I had thrown a bomb right at her chest. Her eyes widened in terror, and the pen she was holding fell to the floor with a sharp clatter. That sound echoed in the silent hallway, confirming that I had hit her deepest fear. "Ma'am, what are you saying? I don't understand," Martha stammered, avoiding my gaze, unable to meet my eyes. She took a step back, clutching the clipboard as if to hold on to it. I moved closer, my voice firm with no trace of softness. "That reaction means it's true, doesn't it?" I looked her straight in the eye, searching for a crack in her panic. Martha's face was pale. Her lips trembled as if she were about to cry. She sank into the chair, speaking in a whisper, almost inaudible. I was just following Dr. Peterson's orders. He asked me to keep the secret. Please, I'm just an employee. Don't involve me in this." That partial confession hit me like a lightning bolt. I stood motionless, feeling as if the floor was opening up beneath my feet. It was true. Emily was not only pretending to be in a coma, but Dr. Peterson, the hospital director, was also involved. I tried to keep my voice calm, though I was boiling with rage inside. "What exactly did he ask you to do? Tell me clearly." I took another step forward, giving her no room to escape. Martha shook her head hard, wringing her hands, speaking in broken sentences. "He just ordered me to take good care of Mrs. Emily, not to tell anyone she had already woken up. I have nothing to do with the rest. I beg you don't blame me." She looked up, her eyes red as if begging for forgiveness. But I couldn't give in, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I needed the truth. I needed to protect my son and grandson from whatever was happening. At that moment, another nurse passed by in the hallway, giving us a curious look. Martha jumped up, picked up her pen, and pretended to resume her notes as if nothing had happened. I turned away in silence, my heart pounding like a drum. Every step out of the hallway felt heavy, as if I were carrying a rock. What Martha had admitted not only confirmed my suspicions, but revealed something worse. This wasn't just a farce by Emily, but a deception backed by someone with power like Dr. Peterson. What were they planning? How could they be so cruel as to deceive an entire family, letting Michael and Leo sink into sorrow? When Michael arrived at the hospital, I tried to remain calm as if nothing had happened. He asked with a tired voice, "Mom, how is Emily? Any news?" I just shook my head and replied softly, "She's the same son. The doctor says there's no progress, but inside the fire was consuming me. I wanted to tell Michael everything, show him Leo's video, tell him his wife was not in a coma, but seeing his red eyes, his exhausted face, I couldn't. Michael had already lost too much, and I was afraid this truth would be the final blow that would completely destroy him." That night, I tossed and turned in my old bed. The faint moonlight seeped through the curtains and lit up the ceiling, but it couldn't dispel the darkness surrounding my mind. I clutched the blanket tightly, trying to force myself to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, sharp questions pierced my heart. Why did Emily do this? What role did Dr. Peterson play in all of this? And the most terrible question, were all those years I loved and trusted my daughter-in-law just a lie? I felt betrayed not just by Emily, but by my own naivety. I realized I couldn't solve this alone. I needed help. The next morning, I got up early and took Leo to school as usual. The boy was still silent, hugging his Spider-Man backpack, his gaze lost as if he were trapped in a world he didn't understand. I stroked his head and tried to smile. "Do your best in school today. I'll pick you up early." Leo nodded, but I knew he didn't believe my words of comfort. Seeing his small back disappear behind the school gate, I felt my heart tighten. I had to find out the truth, not just for myself, but for Leo, so he wouldn't have to live in this darkness any longer. I drove straight to the office of Mr. Sullivan, a private detective who had been a friend of my late husband. He was a former police officer whom my husband always respected for his dedication and sharpness. Sullivan's office was on a run-down corner with a faded wooden sign. When I entered, I saw him sitting behind a scarred desk, his piercing eyes looking at me over silver-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Davis, it's been a while. What's wrong? You seem so tense," he asked in a deep but attentive voice. I took a deep breath and told him everything from Leo's innocent whisper, the unexpected video, to the confrontation with Nurse Martha. I tried to stay calm, but my hands trembled as I showed him the video on my phone. Sullivan watched it over and over, frowning, his fingers tapping gently on the table, as he always did. "This is serious, Mrs. Davis," he said in a low voice. "If what you're saying is true, there's a conspiracy going on. I'll help you, but you have to keep this a secret, especially from your son." I nodded, feeling relieved to share the burden but also heavier as I saw the truth begin to surface. Sullivan promised to start watching the hospital immediately, and I left his office with a fragile spark of hope mixed with fear. That night, I took Leo back to the hospital. The air was as suffocating as ever. The smell of disinfectant hit me, and the constant sounds of machines came from Emily's room. Michael was already there, sitting by his wife's bed, holding her hand tightly, while tears rolled silently down his cheeks. Seeing him like that, pain shot through me. Michael, my strong son, the pride of my life, now seemed like an empty man. I wanted to hug him, tell him the whole truth, but every time I met his red eyes, I didn't dare. How could I tell him that the woman he loved might be cheating on him? How could I break his heart even more? I made an excuse to go out into the hallway for water, leaving Leo with his father. As I passed a corner near the nurse's station, I caught sight of Martha talking to a guard. She slipped a thin folder into his hand, her gaze nervous as if fearing being discovered. I held my breath and slowed my pace to listen better. "Give this to him quickly," Martha mumbled with a trembling voice. The guard nodded, put the folder in his jacket pocket, and walked quickly towards Dr. Peterson's office. When Martha turned back, her eyes met mine. She flinched quickly, lowered her head pretending not to see me, and walked away fast. I moved forward intending to call her, but the guard was already looking at me, his eyes full of suspicion. I stopped, feeling as if an invisible hand was squeezing my throat. A few days later, Sullivan called me to a small cafe hidden in a deserted alley. When I arrived, he was already sitting in a secluded corner with a stack of photos in front of him. "Sit down." I felt my whole body freeze. They were secretly taken photos showing Emily wearing a patient's gown with a white coat over it sneaking out of her room in the middle of the night. She walked with soft but conscious steps, showing no sign of being in a coma. Emily went straight to Dr. Peterson's office. The door slammed shut behind her. The light inside remained on, even though it was past midnight. I took the photos with trembling hands, feeling the blood drain from my face. Is this real?" I whispered with a broken voice. Sullivan nodded, his gaze serious. "His office is very well soundproofed. I couldn't hear anything, but it's clear something strange is going on. I've watched her for several nights, and this isn't the only time she's done it. I'm going to keep investigating, but you need to be prepared. This could be bigger than we think." I nodded, though my mind was blank. Martha's words echoed in my ears. "I'm just following Peterson's orders." The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a terrifying picture I didn't want to believe. When I got home, I sat in the dark kitchen, the dim light falling on my trembling hands. Leo was already asleep, but I knew he was still carrying the fear of his mother. Michael was at the hospital, caring for a wife who might be cheating on him. I took out my phone, watched Leo's video again, and thought about Sullivan's photos. Every detail was like a stab, but I knew I couldn't stop. I decided that in addition to trusting Sullivan, I had to find more evidence myself. I couldn't let my family continue to live a lie. I had to protect Michael, protect Leo, even if the price was my own, heart shattered into pieces. That morning I woke up before dawn. I couldn't sleep, not from tiredness, but because doubt and pain consumed me all night. I looked at the clock. It was barely 4. Michael, my son, was probably still fast asleep after a night of drinking. It was my chance to do what I had put off for too long. I went up the stairs silently barefoot so as not to make a noise. The house was eerily quiet. Only the ticking of the wall clock could be heard. I stood in front of the door to Michael and Emily's room. I gripped the handle tightly, feeling my heart pounding furiously in my chest. I knew I shouldn't do it, that I shouldn't snoop in my son and daughter-in-law's room, but I had no other choice. If Emily was really betraying us, I needed proof, something, to protect my family. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The room was still filled with Emily's sweet, piercing perfume, a scent that once seemed tender and familiar. On the dresser, a red lipstick was left open as if she had just left a few minutes ago. These small details pierced my soul. I remembered when Emily first got married, how she carefully combed her hair, how she smiled when trying on a new dress. Had it all been a lie, I shook my head, chasing away those memories, and started searching. I opened each drawer, careful not to disturb anything. Every small noise, even the slight rustle of fabric, made me jump, fearing that Michael would wake up and find me. I checked the dresser, the bookshelves, even under the bed, but found nothing but the usual things. Finally, I opened the old wardrobe where Emily used to keep her things. In the bottom drawer, hidden under several layers of silk scarves, I found a bundle of blue folders tied with a rubber band. My hands trembled as I opened it, as if I were about to touch a terrible secret. Inside were 2 life insurance policies, the documents carefully printed with Emily's clear signature at the bottom of each page. The first was a health insurance policy with a clause that would pay a huge sum if the patient required long-term treatment or fell into a coma. The amount stunned me enough to buy a large house. The second policy was even more terrifying, a term life insurance policy with a payout several times higher enough to completely change a life. I read it over and over, trying to understand why Emily, a woman with no stable job, had signed such large contracts. She used to ask Michael for money for shopping, and sometimes she would even ask me with some embarrassment to cover basic expenses. So, where did the money to pay for these policies come from, and why did she need them? I took out my phone and photographed every page, being careful not to wrinkle the paper. Every time I pressed the button, I felt like I was betraying my own family, but I knew I had no other choice. I put the folders back in their place, closed the drawer, and left the room. But as soon as I opened the door, I ran into Michael. He was there with a suspicious look, his hair messy, his voice hoarse. "What are you doing in my room, Mom?" I jumped, hid the phone behind my back, my heart pounding. "Oh, I was just looking for the old photo album," I answered awkwardly, forcing a smile. Michael sighed. He didn't ask any more questions and walked unsteadily towards the kitchen, where I knew he would look for the liquor bottle again. Looking at my son's back, I felt my heart ache. I wanted to tell him everything, show him those documents, but I knew Michael wasn't ready to face the truth yet. In the afternoon, I met Sullivan at the small cafe where we had met before. He had new information. When I sat down, he pushed another stack of photos towards me this time, taken in the empty hospital parking lot. The images showed Emily and Dr. Peterson inside a car, sharing intimate gestures that were impossible to deny. Emily, dressed in patient's clothes, smiled at Peterson, her hand on his, her gaze full of intention. I sat motionless, stirring my now cold coffee with a trembling hand. "Is this real, Sullivan?" I whispered with a broken voice. He nodded, his voice grave. "I've been following them for several nights. It's not the first time. There's something very shady here, Mrs. Davis. You need to be prepared." I looked at the photos, feeling the whole world collapse beneath my feet. Emily was not only faking a coma, she was also having a secret affair with Dr. Peterson. This play didn't have just one actress, but two, and they were playing their parts perfectly to deceive my entire family. That midday the heat was suffocating, and the air inside my small bakery felt so thick I could barely breathe. I had just wiped down the counter, sweat beading on my forehead, trying to focus on tidying the place, to forget the doubts eating away at me. In those days, every minute felt like a battle, maintaining the bakery, caring for Leo, and facing the terrifying truth about Emily. I had just arranged the remaining bread in a basket, ready to close up and go rest, when thunderous knocks echoed on the alley door. The noise was so loud it startled me, and I almost dropped the tray. I ran to open it, a bad feeling in my chest. When the door opened, I froze. 3 men blocked the entrance with hard faces and tattoos of snakes and dragons running down their arms. The one who seemed to be the leader, tall and with a shaved head, held out a crumpled piece of paper and spoke with a rough voice. "Where's Emily? It's time to pay the debt." I looked at the paper. My heart was racing as if the blood was draining from my body. I tried to stay calm, though my hands were already shaking. "You're mistaken. My daughter-in-law is in a coma at the hospital. She can't see anyone." The man let out a dry laugh, a sound so cruel it sent a shiver down my spine. "Coma." "Do you think we're idiots?" Emily asked us for a huge sum to invest in a business. "If she plays dumb, this family won't have any peace." His words cut through me like a knife. I looked around and saw some neighbors peeking from their doors, their faces a mix of curiosity and fear. I knew that if this got bigger, the whole neighborhood would talk, and my family would be the target of gossip. I swallowed hard and replied in a controlled voice, "Please calm down. I don't know anything about these debts. Let me find out." But the leader wasn't willing to back down. He smirked and pointed at my small house. "Find out. You have 1 week. If there's no money, sell the house and pay." I felt the ground open up beneath my feet. I wanted to protest, to scream that I had nothing to do with it, that Emily was still in the hospital. But the cold stares of the 3 men made it clear they weren't playing. I hurried inside. I opened the hidden safe in the kitchen and took out all the savings I had put away for years for Leo and the bakery. I placed it in the leader's hand with a trembling voice. "Take this for now. I beg you to give me more time." And they looked at me with contempt, as if deciding whether to ruin everything right there. In the end, the leader pocketed the money and threw one last threat. 1 week. Don't make us come back." Then the 3 of them left. Their heavy footsteps faded into the alley. I collapsed onto the steps, soaked in sweat, not from the heat, but from the fear and helplessness that were strangling me. Emily in debt, investing in businesses. Those words echoed in my head, but they made no sense. She who I always thought was so simple, how could she be involved in something like this? Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Sullivan. I opened it with still trembling hands and felt my heart stop when I saw what he had sent. They were photos of Emily and Dr. Peterson inside a car parked at the hospital. They were embracing shamelessly, and Emily's eyes looked at him with a tenderness that seemed to erase the entire world. Along with the photos was a short audio clip with a note from Sullivan. I recorded their conversation inside the car with a special device. You should listen. I started the recording. My hand was shaking so much I almost dropped the phone. Emily's voice came through rough but clear enough for me to hear every word. Let me sleep a few more weeks and then we'll move on to the final step. That insurance money will solve all the debts and give us a new life. Peterson's voice responded deep and calculating. Don't worry, Emily. Everything is on track. As long as no one suspects, we'll succeed. I turned off the recording, feeling all the strength drain from my body. Everything exploded in my head. Emily was not only faking a coma, not only having an affair with Dr. Peterson, but she had staged a whole charade to escape her debts and collect the insurance money. She planned to leave everything behind, Michael, Leo, and me, to start a new life with her accomplice. That afternoon, I sat in front of a cup of cold coffee, clenching my hands as if I could still hold on to a little courage. I knew that if I wanted to protect my family, I couldn't stay silent any longer. Michael, my son, had to know the truth, even if it destroyed him. I took a deep breath, got up and walked to the living room where Michael was sitting staring blankly into space. I put all the evidence on the table, the photos of Emily and Peterson in the car, the copy of the insurance contract, and the phone with the recording. Michael looked up, his eyes cloudy, not understanding what I was doing. "Mom, what is this?" he asked in a hoarse voice, still smelling of last night's alcohol. I sat across from him, trying to stay firm, though my heart was pounding hard. "Michael, I need you to look at this. I know you don't want to believe it, but you have to face the truth." I pointed to the pile of photos, my voice breaking. "Emily is not in a coma. She is deceiving us." Michael shook his head again and again, his trembling hands brushing against the photos, until he suddenly threw them on the floor and shouted, "This can't be! Where did you get this? It's all fabricated. Emily would never betray me." His red eyes seemed to desperately cling to a faith that was crumbling. I took his trembling hand, speaking as gently as I could. "Michael, you need to wake up. Look at reality. Emily not only deceived you, she also manipulated Leo's innocence. I know it hurts, but you can't keep living a lie. Play the recording." Emily's voice played again, clear and cold. "Let me sleep a few more weeks, and then we'll move on to the final step. That insurance money will solve all the debts and give us a new life." Michael froze as if he had been slapped. He listened to the entire audio and suddenly burst into tears, tears of pain and breakdown. "Why, Mom? Why did she do this to me? Why to Leo?" he whispered in a broken voice. I hugged him, feeling his body tremble in my arms, not knowing how to comfort him. I could only say, "I'm sorry, Michael. I'm suffering too, but we have to be strong for Leo." Michael stood up, staggering, went to the liquor cabinet, filled a glass with tequila, and drank it in one gulp. Then he went into his room and slammed the door. That slam echoed like a hammer blow to my chest. I knew my son needed time, but I also knew I couldn't wait any longer. The truth was out, and if Emily and Peterson were about to take the final step of their plan, I had to act before it was too late. I arranged to meet Sullivan the next morning in a secluded corner of our usual cafe. He was there with a cup of black coffee in front of him, his face tense. "Did you tell Michael?" he asked as soon as I sat down. I nodded, my voice grave. "He doesn't want to believe it, but a mother can't let her son continue to be deceived." "What do we do now, Sullivan?" He tapped the table gently with his fingers, his gaze sharp. "We have enough evidence to go to the police, the recording, the photos, the insurance contract. But if you want Michael to see the truth with his own eyes, we need a final blow at the hospital. We have to make Emily and Peterson expose themselves." I nodded, feeling both determination and fear. I knew Michael needed to see it for himself, otherwise he would always live in the illusion of the wife he once loved. The next day, I looked for Chief Miller, an old classmate, who was now the local police chief. We shared our youth, and I knew she was someone I could trust. In her small office, I told her everything from Leo's video to Sullivan's evidence. Miller listened, her face growing more serious. When I showed her the recording, she shook her head, her voice grave. "This is an organized scam, Mrs. Davis. If what you say is true, Emily and Peterson have not only violated ethics but the law. She paused and looked at me intently. I will help you. But we need a valid pretext to barge in without raising suspicion. Do you have a plan yet? I didn't get a chance to answer when my phone buzzed in my purse. It was Dr. Peterson's number. I answered, my heart racing. His voice on the other side sounded heavy with a false tone of compassion. Mrs. Davis, I'm very sorry to inform you that Emily's situation is getting worse. Perhaps the family should prepare. Tomorrow morning, please have everyone present. We will give the final results. I felt a chill as if I had touched a block of ice. There it was. That was the moment they planned to bring down the curtain on their farce. I tried to sound calm when I replied, Yes, doctor, we will be there tomorrow. After hanging up, I turned to Miller, my voice trembling. Tomorrow in Emily's room. That's the time. Miller nodded with a firm look. All right, I'll prepare the team. We'll act at the right moment. I felt a spark of hope, but at the same time the fear grew. What would happen when Michael faced the truth? Would he be able to handle the blow? And Leo, my dear grandson, how would he react knowing his mother had deceived the whole family? That night, I took Leo to Mrs. Lucy's house, the trusted neighbor across the street. I didn't want the boy to witness the terrible scene that was coming. When I told him he would sleep at Mrs. Lucy's that night, Leo looked at me with worried eyes. Grandma, is my mom okay? Will you take me to see her tomorrow? I hugged him, holding back tears. She's fine, son. I'll pick you up early tomorrow. But when the boy turned away, I felt my heart break. How could I protect him from such a cruel truth? When I got back home, I found Michael sitting in the dark with a liquor bottle rolling at his feet. He didn't say anything, just sat there, his eyes red and empty. I approached him, put my hand on his shoulder, and said a single sentence. You have to go to the hospital tomorrow. You need to know the final truth. Michael looked up, his face marked by pain, but he nodded in silence. I knew he also felt that everything was about to change forever. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house was as heavy as lead. I woke up early, not out of habit to bake bread, but because of the feeling of unease that squeezed my chest. Today was the day everything would come to light, and although I had prepared myself, my heart was still trembling. Michael was sitting at the table, not saying a word, his face gaunt and exhausted after so many days lost between alcohol and pain. I looked at my son. I wanted to say something to comfort him, but my throat closed up. Let's go, Michael. It was the only thing I could say, my voice hoarse. He nodded, stood up, and together we got in the car, driving in silence towards St. Gabriel's Hospital. The whole way, Michael stared out the window, his gaze lost as if his soul had left his body long ago. When we arrived at the hospital, the familiar hallway appeared with the strong smell of disinfectant and the constant noise of the machines. Martha was there with a few other nurses, her face nervous, restless, as if she knew something was about to happen. I glanced at her but said nothing, just squeezed Michael's hand to give him strength. Dr. Peterson came out of his office with a file in his hand, greeted us with feigned formality, and said in a grave, solemn voice, Mrs. Davis, Mr. Michael, please come in. I nodded, though rage boiled inside me. I knew that just outside Miller and her team of police officers were already in position. We entered Emily's room, where some relatives had already gathered. The air was heavy, as if everyone could feel the tension. Emily lay motionless in the bed, her face pale, but I no longer saw her as a victim. I only saw a woman who had staged a cruel play deceiving my entire family. Peterson, standing by the bed, began his speech with a pitiful voice. After many days of effort, we regret to inform you that the patient's condition is worsening. We fear she may not survive. The family should be prepared. Michael hung his head, his shoulders trembling. Some relatives began to sob, and the moans spread, creating a scene of mourning as fake as it was calculated. I stood firm, my fists clenched, holding back the fury that burned in my chest. I looked at Peterson at his perfect performance and knew it was only a matter of seconds before his theater came to an end. But what they didn't imagine was that today, Miller and I would be the ones to bring down the curtain. Just as Peterson raised his pen to sign the certificate of fatal prognosis, the door burst open. 3 uniformed police officers entered, led by Miller, whose gaze was cold and determined. The room fell into absolute silence. Miller declared firmly. "Dr. Peterson, Mrs. Emily Ortega, you are under arrest for fraud and insurance scam." Her voice resonated loudly, relentlessly, like a hammer blow that shattered the entire farce. And then something incredible happened. Emily, the one supposedly in a deep coma, suddenly opened her eyes, sat up in bed, and screamed, "What are you talking about? You have no proof. This is slander." Her shrill, desperate voice had nothing to do with someone who had been motionless for weeks. Michael was paralyzed, his mouth open, staring at his wife, supposedly dying, screaming like a wild animal. Emily turned to him, and a flash of panic appeared in her eyes, as if she had realized she had just given herself away. She quickly turned her face, unable to meet her husband's gaze. Miller gave a signal, and an officer stepped forward, presenting all the evidence. The photos of Emily and Peterson in the car, the recording of their conversation, the images of the insurance contract, and the statement from Nurse Martha. I took out my cell phone and showed the video Leo had recorded where Emily was seen opening her eyes in secret drinking water and getting up when no one was watching. Murmurs and comments began to fill the room. A relative muttered, "My God, how is this possible?" Another exclaimed, "She deceived our entire family." The atmosphere in the room turned chaotic, as if the truth had just shattered all illusions. Michael trembled, his gaze fixed on Emily. Then, as if waking from a dream, he shouted with a broken voice, "Emily, why did you do this to me? Why to Leo?" Emily lunged at him, trying to hug him, crying and begging. "Michael, you have to understand, I had no choice. I owed so much, I just wanted a better life for us." But Michael pushed her hands away abruptly, his eyes now reflecting only rage and disgust. "Better you abandoned our son. You abandoned this family just for money." His voice trembled, as if each word was a dagger stabbing his own chest. Peterson stood there, his head down, unable to make any more excuses, as the recording in the car played. His voice boomed cold and calculating. "Don't worry, Emily. As long as no one suspects, we'll succeed." The whole room fell silent. Only the distant sound of the hospital's PA system could be heard. Miller gave a signal, and the police placed the cold silver handcuffs on both of their wrists. Emily was still struggling, screaming desperately. "I did everything because of the debts. I had no way out." But no one believed her anymore, not even the relatives who were crying for her earlier. Now they just looked at her with strange eyes. Michael collapsed into a chair, his hands on his head, as if he couldn't bear the weight of the truth. I approached him, put my hand on my son's shoulder, and said softly, "This is the truth, son. I know it hurts, but we have to move on." Michael didn't respond, just sat there, tears falling silently. I felt his pain as if it were my own. I had lost a daughter-in-law whom I had loved, but Michael had lost a part of his life. The hospital room, once quiet, was now chaos. Emily's screams grew fainter and more distant as she was led away in handcuffs. Peterson walked behind his head low, with no trace of the authority of a hospital director. When the door closed, returning the silence, I looked around the room at the stunned faces of the relatives and felt a great emptiness in my heart. The truth had come to light, but it brought no joy, only pain and emptiness. A few months have passed since that day. The truth exploded in the hospital room, but every moment is still engraved in my memory. The image of Emily sitting up and screaming crazily, the pain-filled eyes of Michael, and the sound of handcuffs closing on their wrists, it all seemed like an unforgettable nightmare. But now in front of the court, I feel a slight relief, as if a weight is finally being lifted from my heart. Today is the day of the public trial for Emily and Dr. Peterson, and I know it will be the final point of the cruel play that destroyed my family. Michael and I sat in the front row of the packed courtroom. The atmosphere was suffocating, filled with the murmurs of strangers, the press, and some neighbors. Michael was next to me, much thinner than before, but he no longer had the desperation that the bottles gave him. There was a calmness in his eyes, as if he had learned to live with the pain. I took his hand, squeezing it tightly to give him support. He looked at me, smiled faintly, and I understood that although it still hurt, he was trying to move on. The judge, a middle-aged man with a stern face, began to read the indictment. His voice resonated clearly, each word like a hammer blow that shattered the falsehood of the past few months. Emily and Peterson were accused of multiple crimes: fraud, insurance scam, and conspiracy to misappropriate assets. All the evidence was shown publicly on the large screen in the courtroom. Leo's video, Sullivan's photos, the recording in the car, and the insurance contracts I found in the drawer. Each piece of evidence was a piece of the puzzle that exposed the elaborate plan by Emily and Peterson to deceive my entire family. Peterson sat in the defendant's box, his head bowed, not daring to look up. He admitted his guilt, his voice low, almost a whisper, acknowledging that he had helped Emily out of ambition and because of his shady relationship with her. Emily, on the other hand, was still trying to resist. She cried, her hair tangled, her red eyes looking towards Michael. "Michael, I'm sorry. I didn't want it to be this way. I just wanted to pay off the debts. I wanted a better life for us." But those belated tears no longer moved anyone. Michael looked at her coldly, without a drop of compassion. "Better you betrayed this family. You betrayed Leo just for money," he said, his voice trembling with anger and pain. The final sentence was delivered. Peterson received 6 years in prison. Emily 5 years in addition to the obligation to repay all damages. When the judge struck the gavel, the sharp sound marked the end of everything. Emily collapsed, crying inconsolably, but no one in the room wanted to look at her. Peterson was escorted out, his head low, the figure of someone who once had power and now was nothing more than a shadow. Michael was beside me, his hands clenched, tears falling silently. I knew they were not tears of suffering, but of liberation. My son was finally free from the illusion of a wife he once loved. When we left the courthouse, the radiant sun no longer burned as before. The press surrounded us, microphones in our faces, questions thrown relentlessly. I only said one sentence in a calm but firm voice. "Justice has been served. Never play with a family's feelings because the price will be too high." Michael stood beside me, not saying a word, but squeezing my hand tightly, as if he wanted to tell me he was ready to move on. Our life slowly returned to normal, though the scars remained. My little bakery filled up with customers again. The smell of flour and yeast once again brought that feeling of home. Every morning I got up early, kneaded, baked the first batches of bread, and felt my heart lighter. Leo started chatting again, helping me arrange the bread, running around the shop with his pure smile. He still mentioned his mother, but no longer with that lost sadness from before. His laughter, like sunlight, was filling the painful gaps in our small home. Michael changed too. He got a new job at a mechanic shop where he could focus on concrete things instead of getting lost in alcohol. I saw him learn to be a real father, spending time playing with Leo, taking him to school, and telling him stories every night. Some nights I saw Michael sitting silently by the window, his gaze lost, but I knew he was learning to forgive not Emily but himself. One afternoon, when the whole family was gathered around the table, Leo suddenly looked up, his eyes wide, and looked at me. "Grandma, is Mom ever coming back?" The boy's question was like a stab, but I smiled, took his small hand, and answered tenderly. "Some people choose to leave Leo, but the important thing is that we still have each other. Grandma, your dad, and you, that's family." Michael looked at me. His eyes shone with determination, and then he stroked Leo's head. "That's right, son. We'll always be here for each other." Leo nodded, an innocent smile on his face, and for the first time in many months, I felt this house was warm again. I stood there looking at my son and my grandson, my heart full of peace. The worst storm had passed, leaving scars, but also giving us the strength to move on. I thought about the days of suffering, the sleepless nights, and all those times I thought I couldn't bear any more. But now I know my family made it. We not only survived, but we became stronger, more united. I got up, poured another glass of orange juice for Leo, and smiled as I listened to him talk about the new drawing he had made in class. A drawing of his grandma, his dad, and him together, under a bright sun. Seeing Leo's smile and Michael's firm gaze, I knew that no matter how painful the past had been, we would move on together. My small house, once shattered by the storm, was now rebuilt, not with bricks, but with love and trust. And I, who had dedicated my entire life to protecting this family, finally found a little peace in my heart. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell it to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I truly wonder if you were in my shoes. What would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for others. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. For now, on the end screen, I will leave two of the most beloved stories from the Elderly Stories channel. I am convinced they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.